All right, man, it is college basketball season. This is my favorite time of year. I broke out my Syracuse cereal box, the craziest piece of memorabilia that I own. You got Derek Coleman, Carmelo, Pearl Washington, Jerry, who could be the next Penn State basketball coach. We'll see. But I love college basketball. We're going to talk about it a good bit today. We got John Perrotto, longtime sports writer. Really appreciate John for joining us. Jason Dambach from our Friday football showcase videos. Guys, I love this time of year. Jason, I know you're a huge college hoops fan. How much are you looking forward to finally having opening day on Wednesday?
I can't wait. I mean, check your local listings is all I can say, but we will have basketball starting Wednesday and couldn't be more excited.
John, you've been a baseball guy a lot of your life. What does college basketball mean to you? Do you get excited this time of year?
Yeah, I do. I've always been a college basketball fan and actually used to do quite a bit of it earlier on in my career in the off seasons between baseball seasons. Did a lot of Pitt, a lot of Duquesne, Robert Morris, what have you, smaller colleges, Geneva, some of the smaller colleges in Western Pennsylvania. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And, I think it's fitting. The very first game is San Francisco and Towson, which are two teams that have nothing in common. They're like two coasts away. And it's a game that's at 9 a.m, which is only fitting in a strange season. And San Francisco's a last-minute fill-in for St. Bonaventure. So all the goofiness that this season's going to bring just kind of encapsulated with the first game of the year.
Yeah, and what we're going to see here, folks, Penn State's game, their season opener for Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock against Drexel, it was canceled a couple hours ago earlier today because of COVID protocols. That's all we know. I don't know if the COVID protocols came from the Penn State side or the Drexel side. I asked, was not answered. I'm assuming it's probably the Penn State side. Their game against VMI on Saturday is still scheduled to be played. But, John, is this just what we're going to see for the next 3 or 4 months with games being scheduled, but then just a lot of haphazardness where games are postponed, canceled, and teams are just going to have to be ready on a whim?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, basketball is especially tough. We've seen it impact the college football season quite a bit here in the last few weeks. About 25-30% of the games across the country have had to be either postponed or canceled here in the last few weekends. In football, at least you can absorb an outbreak a little bit better because you obviously have a bigger roster, more kids in your program. Basketball is tough. I mean, a lot of programs have 12, 13 guys, maybe 15 or 16 at the most. So all of a sudden, 3 or 4, you get 3 or 4 players either test positive or have to go into contact tracing. And you're not going to have enough guys to play, field a team. I know you can say, well, as long as you have 5 guys, but I mean, realistically, it's hard to play 5 guys for an entire 40-minute game at the college level. So, I think it's going to be that way. Teams are going to be flexible. They're going to have to be flexible. They already have been flexible. We were talking about the San Francisco Towson game, and and already you've seen a lot of teams, and there's still some teams. I mean, Wednesday is opening day of the. Or tomorrow, Wednesday, the opening day of the season, and there's still a lot of teams in Division One, and not just the low majors, but even a lot of the high majors, a lot of the top 25 programs that still are looking to fill games in a non-conference schedule because everything's been thrown out of whack. So I think you're going to see a lot of games thrown together in a hurry, kind of like you did with Cal and UCLA in football a couple of Sundays ago, and I think that's going to be the norm. And I think that they hope by the time the conference play starts that maybe it'll settle down a little bit. I also think you'll probably see some conference schedules make last-minute changes too.
Pitt and St. Francis open up on Wednesday, 2 Western PA teams. Jason Dambach, I want to ask you about this. You and I have talked about this a little bit, that you have to get to March. No matter how many games are canceled between now and March, you have to get to March because of the NCAA tournament and the money. How confident are you that even if some of these teams end up having 3, 4, 6, 8 games canceled, that there will be an NCAA tournament?
I've got a high degree of confidence in that, Corey. I think, again, it's going to be a rocky road. It's going to be very bumpy. As John mentioned, you're going to have a lot of schedule changes, some of them last minute. I'm pretty confident because, as we've talked about, Corey, this has to happen this year. The NCAA, the conferences, they need the NCAA tournament to happen. financially and for many other reasons. So I'm confident it will happen. This is going to be really bumpy, though, the next few weeks. To further John's point, I think the other side of it, too, with football, we've seen mostly conference play. There have been some non-conference games that have been played with smaller conference teams and large conference teams. But for the most part, we've seen conference play. And so that means consistent testing protocols, consistent logistics. In college basketball, this is really the first time since sports resumed back in the summer that you have the Davids and the Goliaths playing against each other. You've got the ACC and the NEC. You've got the Big Ten and the MEAC. And we all know which conferences have the wherewithal to do the significant testing, to put all those protocols in place. And I think we all know the resources that a lot of these programs in the NEC and some of the smaller conferences are dealing with. So that's going to lead to a lot more of a chaotic situation that I think we've already seen.
All right. I'm going to give a real quick preview of Penn State. Interim coach Jim Ferry this year after Patrick Chambers' resignation. I've got a lot on the website about all of that, including some potential coaches that could replace Chambers at the end of the year. But I went through game by game, 25 games. I picked Penn State to go 8-17, 6-14 in the Big Ten. Now that sounds terrible, but look, the Big Ten's awesome. The Big Ten's got 7-8 teams that are going to be in the top 30, 40 in the country. And it's tough to find wins. It's just tough to find wins. So, and one of the games I think Penn State could have won against Drexel on Wednesday is canceled, although that would have been a tough game. Drexel's pretty good. So I think it's going to be a tough year for Penn State. JD, I want to get your thoughts on Pitt, and then we're going to turn to John for some national view. But Capel has done a tremendous job at Pitt. Do they take a next step forward this year?
I think they do take a bit of a next step. I don't know that they take an NCAA tournament step. It's very premature for that. The ACC is back to where it typically is. I mean, last year it was a down year. When you had North Carolina finishing in last place, that tells you all you need to know about the ACC. So I do think they take a bit of a step forward. The one encouraging sign for Pitt is that Jeff Capel has finally rebuilt the roster to the point where they've got not only good starters, but they've got quality depth. Now, a lot of it will be young, some freshmen, guys like John Hughley, who could start, a big man in the middle, Will Jeffress, a 4-star recruit out of Erie, Noah Collier. So these are names to keep in mind. But with Xavier Johnson and Audice Toney and Justin Champagny, they've got some good building blocks that will give them an opportunity to climb, I think, to the middle of the pack in the ACC, which realistically I think is the ceiling for this team. So if you were to ask me what kind of record you're looking at, let's assume they play 25 games, 5 of them non-conference. I think 8-12 in the ACC would be realistic. With another 4 wins in the non-conference. So a 12-13, 13-12 kind of year, I think, is what would be realistic for Pitt. This is a year where they really needed a 13-game non-conference schedule to build a lot of wins.
Yeah, right.
We're not going to get that this year.
That's a great point, that a lot of these teams, it's like for Penn State football, they're 0-5 because they didn't have any cupcake wins to get ready for the season. You jump right into conference play. John, taking a look at the national view, you got Gonzaga out there, you got Baylor, Villanova, Virginia, some of these names that we're used to hearing. If you had to pick a couple of the teams that you would really want to watch early on in the season from a national perspective, who would that be?
I really like Baylor. I think, to me, it depends on the poll. Baylor was number 1 in the USA Today in the coaches poll. They're number 2 in the AP media poll, though they only were 1 vote behind Gonzaga. That's how close the media vote was in the initial poll this year. They have Jared Butler. They have Maseo Teague, and you just need good guard play in today's college basketball. And they have that with those 2 guys. And they also have Mark Vital, who's one of the best, defensive players in the whole country. And, the only thing, if you want to nitpick a little, Their inside game is a little questionable. Tristan Clark has never really come back from his knee injury, the big man, and now he's decided to retire from basketball. So, but I think right now, to me, Baylor is the team to beat. I think obviously Gonzaga is a very good. They have Corey Kispert back, one of the best players in the country, a preseason All-American, but I think, you mentioned Virginia, another one. I really like Villanova. I really like Colin Gillespie a lot. I think he's one of the best players in the country. And I think, they're going to be good. And I think there's unquestioned now that Jay Wright is up there with just any coach in the country. Year in and year out, Villanova's going to be good. He has built that program to the point where they're going to be a top 10 program year in and year out. So, like you said, Virginia, Tony Bennett's a great coach. But if I had to go pick somebody now, and this is such a weird season that maybe George Mason will get back to the Final Four, but I would have to say, to me, if I had to pick somebody right now, to me on paper, Baylor looks like the best team.
Isn't that something? The top two teams in the country are Gonzaga and Baylor. Now look, Gonzaga's been really good for a long time. They've finally kind of gotten over that hump a little bit the last 5 or 6 years, although still no national titles. But Gonzaga and Baylor, John, I mean, we're all a little older. We've grown up with all the blue bloods. And what if I told you in 1990 that at some point the top two teams in the country going into the year were going to be Gonzaga and Baylor?
Hard to believe. It really is. And it's amazing, and I know the knock on Gonzaga is, they haven't won a national championship, but what Mark Few has done there in Spokane, Washington, not exactly the epicenter of basketball talent, Eastern Washington and the Palouse. I mean, to build that program in a mid-major, they're still in the West Coast Conference. They don't play in a big conference. Even though they're on national TV quite a bit, a lot of their games are on late at night, and a lot of people on the East Coast don't see a whole lot of Gonzaga. I think it's amazing what he's done, and what Scott Drew did at Baylor from a program that basically was on the cusp of getting the death penalty 20 years ago when Scott Drew took over. And I think a lot of people forget that now, how serious of problems they had in the program at Baylor. It wasn't just that they were losing. I mean, they had one of their players murdered another one of their own players in the program. It doesn't get any, I'm not trying to be flippant here, but I don't know if you could have any worse situation in any athletic program than something that like that to happen. And to go from that to now being a consistently top 25 program and a team that people legitimately think can win the national championship, it's really a credit to Scott Drew and the program that he really truly did raise from the ashes and turn them into one of the best teams in the country, one of the best programs on the rise in the whole college basketball scene.
JD, I know you watch a lot of games around the country. What teams do you like watching? I know you're a Pitt fan, but if you're turning on a game on a Tuesday night or Thursday night, what teams do you enjoy watching that are entertaining?
Well, I was actually going to ask John about this because I know he just wrote about the Big 12, but believe it or not, as a Pitt fan, the team that I'm really excited to watch this year is West Virginia. Because if you look at the guys that they have inside, it's a rugged team, and if you followed Pitt basketball for a long time, that their key to success back in the Jamie Dixon, Ben Howland era was the ruggedness, their toughness. And this could be one of Bob Huggins' tougher teams to play against. When you look at Oscar Chibwe and Derek Culver, these are two guys that probably are going to average a double-double this year. They're going to make it really difficult for teams. Can they get the outside shooting, John? That's going to be the key. But, I'm actually really looking forward to watching West Virginia because I view them as a team that does have the pieces, I think, to make a pretty good run in the NCAA tournament because they're going to be so hard to play against, especially in a year like this.
Yeah, I think West Virginia's got a chance to be really good too. And like you said, can they shoot it? That's the big question. I think there's no question that they can score inside, that they will beat teams on the boards. Pretty much everybody on their schedule they'll out rebound. The big thing for me, they only shot 29% from the floor last year, and that really hurt them when they got into Big 12 play. They just even though it's so rare to have two really good agile big men in today's game, and so much depends on outside shooting, I mean, they have to find somebody to be able to fill it up from outside. Not necessarily 3 or 4 guys, but at least that one go-to guy that they know can knock down a three when they really need it. And they didn't have that last year. And if they can either develop somebody on that roster, or one of the guys they brought in as a recruit, it could quickly develop into that player, I think that's going to make a big difference, because like I said, inside, you're not going to find a better inside duo in the country than those two guys.
And Cory, the other thing that I'm really excited about is the Big Ten. It's going to be really good. As you mentioned, it's going to be really hard for Penn State. And the thing that excites me about the Big Ten this year, Michigan State isn't necessarily the favorite. Michigan's not necessarily the favorite. You're looking at Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin's been there. They're usually in the hunt. But this could be a year where one of kind of those second-tier programs, it's not always at the top, has a chance to make a run. This is going to be the best team that Iowa's had in a long time. Certainly at Illinois, probably going back to the Kendall Gill days back in the late 1980s. So the Big Ten's going to be rugged. It's going to be a great conference to watch this year. We'll see if Archie Miller can have a good season in Indiana. They seem to have a team that's set up for some success as well.
You stuck a dagger in my heart mentioning Kendall Gill. They beat my Sherman Douglas-led Syracuse team in '89. Kendall Gill, Marcus Liberty, Battle. Oh, my gosh. Hey, those are some great teams. And we haven't seen Illinois be all that good, really for a long, long time. But I like what you mentioned there. I actually vote. I'm a Wooden Award voter. I voted for Luka Garza for National Player of the Year last year for the Wooden Award. Now, Obi Toppin from Dayton got it. And that was a great story. Dayton had a great year. But Luka Garza had better numbers and played better competition than Obi Toppin did from Dayton. So I love Luka Garza. Can he have the same kind of year dominant that he did last year?
Well, I think he can. I think he's going to even be better. I mean, I would think, he dedicated himself to coming back. A lot of people thought he was going to leave for the NBA, including me, decided to come back. And, all the, Fran McCaffrey has just raved about how much better he is, which is kind of hard to believe he could be that much better, as good as he was last year. But it's going to be interesting to see. And I think Iowa, there's another team, we talked earlier about teams that win the national title. I certainly think Iowa, I mean, they have 4 starters back. They have Joe Wieskamp and a couple other guys back too. I think it's going to be very interesting. And I tell you who I would like if they could somehow have the roster back from last year as a dark horse in the Big Ten. I'd go with Penn State. I mean, I think if they had what they had last year, they would have been interesting in this conference this year too. And I do think the one thing they do have going for them, I mean, anytime you lose your coach as close to the season as Penn State did, that's a very tumultuous situation. But Jim Ferry has Division I coaching experience. I know he didn't win at Duquesne, but nobody since Red Manning has won at Duquesne. So I don't know if we can hold that against him, but he was a very good coach at Long Island. And I understand the NEC is not the Big Ten, but I mean, this is a guy who's proven that he can win. And I think, at least Penn State has some stability there to have somebody. They're very fortunate to have somebody with head coaching experience to come in and kind of calm the waters right now.
I do agree with that, the leadership. It'll be tough to replace Lamar Stevens. They've got some good talent. And I picked them to go 8-17, but that's a byproduct of just how tough the Big Ten is. If you put Penn State in some other leagues, maybe they would win some more games this year. I want to close this with some coaching, because college basketball is largely about coaching. JD, I want to start with you on this. Give me 2 or 3 coaches that you either respect a great deal, enjoy watching their programs, you can buy into them year in and year out.
Well, I mentioned, again, not to have too much of a bromance with West Virginia as somebody that's been a Pitt fan my whole life, but Bob Huggins, I mean, is it crazy to say that he doesn't get the respect that maybe he deserves? Now, I know the persona doesn't hit everybody the right way, and he's had some issues off the court, and things didn't end well at Cincinnati. They didn't go to class and things of that nature. But, I just really respect kind of his old school approach to basketball and the way he coaches it in today's environment. You don't hear about his players disliking him. It's tough love still. But he's a guy that I absolutely respect. And it really, they had some down years a few years ago. He sort of reinvented the way they were putting their program together, got back to the basics. And here they are again with a chance. And I know this is awfully chalky, but Jay Wright, I mean, how can you let that guy walk into your living room and not give him a commitment, right? I mean, he's got the mothers on his side. We know that. But what a job he's done building that program at Villanova, because we all remember before he got there, I think it was the end of the Steve Lapis era, things weren't as good. And not that Villanova had a prolonged down period, but the level of sustained success that he has had at Villanova, man, not to bring up two rivals of Pitt, but you have to really admire Jay Wright and Bob Huggins. Just really enjoy watching their teams and the way they go about their business.
You love Scotty Reynolds, don't you?
I do not like Scotty Reynolds. I will go on record as saying that.
John, how about you? Who are a couple coaches out there that you take a look at, you just know they're going to be good?
I like Tom Izzo at Michigan State. I know he's been there a million years and he's been to a lot of Final Fours, and the knock on him is he's only won the national title once. But, he's had a lot of talent. But I think his teams are usually pretty fundamentally sound, too. I mean, they can usually shoot pretty well. They're usually pretty good in all facets of the game. And I don't think it's necessarily him just rolling the ball out saying, go ahead, boys, go play. I don't think he overcoaches either. I don't think he gets in the way of the talent he has on his roster. But I think he always finds a way. And you look at that team, and he'll always find some guys that aren't the 5-star type recruits, the 4-star types. And he'll find those players will turn out to be really good players for Michigan State. Sometimes outshine the 3-stars will end up being better players in their career than the 5-star players. And I think he does a really good job. Plus, he's funny. And I like funny. Anybody that's funny is fine with me. He's a funny guy.
I'm going to mention Tony Bennett. And as a Syracuse fan, that's a tough one because he's owned Syracuse for a lot of years. But Tony Bennett used to make my eyes bleed watching Virginia because they'd win 41-40, and I'd want to throw my TV out the damn window because it was just atrocious. And then what he did, he figured out how to still play that defense, but then get Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter and figured out how to score. Now, they had the UMBC embarrassment that will never go away from them in a 1-16. Then they come back the next year and they win the national title. To me, Tony Bennett has a style that it's tough to play Virginia. And maybe sometimes they get back to these 45-44 games. But I do respect that Tony's been able to change with the times and understood what it would take to get to the next level. JD, if I could mention Jamie Dixon there, that's one reason Jamie never got to the next level, and Scotty Reynolds, is because they just couldn't score enough once they got to the tournament. Tony Bennett figured that out. And winning in the regular season is one thing. Winning in the tournament and going on and cutting down the nets is a different thing.
Yeah, well, no question about that. And, he got over that hump. I mean, to lose to UMBC, to have that year-long embarrassment and always having to answer that question, I was really happy for them. I was rooting for Virginia to win that national title, certainly over Auburn and Texas Tech. My suspicions about those programs notwithstanding, it was just good to see Virginia win that national title. And we didn't mention them yet, but they seem to have reloaded and are back in the top 5. I mean, they were playing really good basketball at the end of the season last year and could have been a factor had we had an NCAA tournament. But I agree with Tony Bennett, a class act, a guy that runs a good program and has evolved, has gone from that 41-40, make your eyes bleed kind of guy to making defense look beautiful. John,
give me a national champion.
Well, I'm going to go back to Baylor. I think it's their year. If they can get by Kansas, that seems to be their one Achilles heel. If they can get by Kansas and get that first seed in the tournament, if they can get by Kansas in the Big 12, I just like their team a lot. I just think they have the experience, they have the coaching, and I think they're the team to beat. But again, this is going to be such a screwy season.
Yep.
There could be somebody we aren't even thinking about right now. Could just stay healthy all year and end up winning it all.
when you get into a tournament, JD and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, maybe we might need some bubble situations for these conferences. But when you get into the tournament, who's going to be healthy? Will we have a vaccine in March? Will they get the vaccine? These are a lot of questions. I'm going to go with Baylor too, for a lot of the reasons John mentioned. JD, I'll give you the last word for your national champion.
I think it's Gonzaga's year. John outlined some of the reasons earlier. They bring back Kispert. They got a McDonald's All-American coming in this year. So, they're starting to recruit at a really, really high level. And the one point, Cory, you and I have talked about this on your radio shows in the past about Gonzaga. The West Coast Conference usually is a walkthrough for them. It's not really going to be that this year. It's going to be a really good league. BYU is a top 25 team, I think. Pepperdine has 2 All-American candidates on their roster. St. Mary's is always really good with Randy Bennett. So I do believe that the West Coast Conference is going to give them a little more of a challenge than they normally get. Hopefully that will ready them for the NCAA tournament, and I do pick them to win it all.
I stay up late. I watch a lot of those games. I watch a lot of BYU and Tyler Hawes, who I think is 46 years old, or TJ, or whichever one it was. I also watch a lot of Bill Walton driving Dave Pasch nuts late at night. Bill Walton's got to be smoking something during these games because he is out of control. But I'm up watching my TV at 1 o'clock in the morning, listen to him call these UCLA or Arizona or Utah games. I'm just rolling laughing. John, you a Bill Walton fan?
Yeah. He certainly keeps things interesting. Half the time he loses me sometimes. I shouldn't say half the time, maybe a quarter of the time. But he's an entertaining guy. And, I've never met Bill Walton, but I sure would like to someday. I just think it'd be fascinating to have maybe just a 5-minute conversation with him.
JD, how about Bill Raftery? Onions!
I mean, that's the guy. If you asked me who would I like to have a beer with, it would be Bill Raftery, who I actually did meet one time. He was very gracious with his time. John, I'm sure you've met him before at the Pitt or Fitzgerald Fieldhouse or somewhere along the way. I would love to spend a lot of time with that guy.
I grew up with Dick Vitale. I know he drives people nuts because I think he might be on Duke's payroll. I'm not certain, but even after all these years, the excitement that hey, look, JD and I, Dick Vitale helped make college basketball. ESPN, what ESPN and Dick Vitale did for college basketball, the Big East and all this in the 80s, that's why I, as somebody in Arkansas, am holding a Syracuse box at 47 years old because I saw Pearl Washington hit a half-court shot when I was 10 years old, and I've been a Syracuse fan forever. That's what those guys – that's why I'm a big college basketball fan.
I agree. And if I could add one thing about Dick Vitale, he may be the most unpretentious celebrity I've ever met in my life. He's just a good man. I've known Dick for a long time. Dick lives in Bradenton, Florida. He would come around to a lot of Pirate spring training games. I've got to known him for over 30 years. And, every time to this day, when I see him, when I'm down in spring training, he never big leagues me, always happy, always makes sure it comes right up and says hello and starts talking and talking.
Does he say, John, you're my type of dandy, John?
Yeah.
Nice. Guys,
he's great. And I know that he's not everybody's cup of tea, but you know what? It's from a good place in his heart, the enthusiasm. It's not fake. He's not a phony. That's who he is. And I think if you have the chance to meet him, and like I said, I've been blessed to get to know him a little bit over the years. He's as genuine as they come, and he just loves college basketball.
Guys, really appreciate you doing this. John Perrotto, Jason Dambach, thanks so much. Really hope everybody enjoyed our preview here. And thanks so much to everybody for tuning in. Thanks, fellas.
Oh, my pleasure, Cory. Thanks for having me. Good seeing you, Jason.
Yeah, good seeing you guys. Enjoy the season.
Take care, guys.